Today's guest is Alan Katz, also known as Al Katz, the creative force behind HBO's iconic Tales from the Crypt and co-creator of the unforgettable Crypt Keeper. Beyond Hollywood success, Alan's story is about confronting personal truth, reclaiming his voice, and finding real happiness through writing, storytelling, and now podcasting. You're in for a powerful conversation. This program is part of the Scene Project's podcast network. The Scene Project features interviews with independent musicians, comedians, and artists from across the Midwest. Become part of our community and support local art wherever you are. Well, welcome into a very exciting episode of The Scene. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today, co-creator of the Crypt Keeper and now head of Costard and Touchstone Productions, Alan Katz. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bubba. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the mission that you're on.
Well, and we talked a little bit off camera. I told you how you gave me nightmares as a kid. You told me how podcasts are healing the world, and it's something that we repeat on this show a lot. So I'd love to give you a chance to give us a little bit of your backstory. Obviously, a storied career there with home box office back in the day, let's say, and but a really exciting venture that you have now, producing podcasts. So the floor is yours, sir.
It's funny. I set out into this world. I thought I was going to be an actor. I've been writing professionally since I was 16. So I've always taken it for granted. I grew up in Baltimore. So I'm an East Coaster. I grew up in Baltimore. I went to school in New York. I went to a place called Vassar. And that was actually at Vassar was where I learned about storytelling. Like I said, I'd been writing professionally since I was 16. People were paying me to write. But the first inkling I got about actual storytelling was at a dramatic literature lecture that my professor, a person named Everett Sprinshorn, one of the world authorities on Strindberg and Ibsen, and his lecture on Ibsen's Ghosts blew my mind while opening it to the potential to the core concepts of if you want to make a difference in the world with your story, which was always Ibsen's intent, here's how you set your story up and pay it off. I went to one audition as an actor after Vassar, and I thought, what kind of an idiot? And I was not prepared for the audition. I was terrible. But I said to myself, what kind of an idiot me is going to make a living this way? I'll go be a writer instead, which in a way is just as big an idiot. No, it is just as big an idiot. And I had a friend who'd become an agent at William Morris, a friend from school from back in Baltimore. Carol Younkus was in the literary department, and she knew that I was into writing again. And she said, you should try writing a screenplay. And I did. I sent it to her. And she said, this is really good. You should come out and meet and greet people. And so in June 1985, I flew out to Los Angeles for a week. A burgeoning New Yorker. To me, Los Angeles was the stupidest place on the planet. Can I swear on your air? No, I can't.
Yeah, you sure can.
I can. Okay, because it's a Hollywood story, and it just I can do it either way. But yeah, to me, Los Angeles was the stupidest fucking place on the planet. The land of the avocado head. I'd been there once when I was 14 on a team tour. And for 2 days, made no real impression on me. But on the East Coast, and I think it might be in the Dakotas too, where you are, Bubba, June, it's hot and it's humid. In Manhattan, every place smelled like piss. In Los Angeles, there's no humidity. It's the desert. The weather's fantastic. And this was 40 years ago. It was a lot less crowded than it is today. And the people were so incredibly nice. They blew copious amounts of smoke up my behind about the screenplay that I had written. It was rather enthralling. One night, my agent Carol took me to a screening to an opening, St. Elmo's Fire. William Morris represented it, and so my view of this was backstage, and it was intoxicating. At the party afterwards, someone I had nothing to do the next morning. I didn't have the appointment set up, and someone said, "Well, you should take a drive through Topanga Canyon, which is within the city limits." Back then, 40 years ago, it was a lot less built up than it is now, and okay. And it's beautiful. And as I was driving from the freeway, the 101, through the Santa Monica Mountains, as they plunge into the Pacific Ocean at the Pacific Coast Highway, by the time I got to the water, New York, screw New York. I was moving to LA, which is exactly what I did the following month. Among the very first people that I met that first week in LA was a guy named Gil Adler. And Gil was going to become my best friend for a decade and my creative partner, my writing partner. Gil, now I did not come out of horror. I made my money in horror, and horror was good to me, but I was comedy, which to me, Tales from the Crypt is black comedy. But I came out of comedy. The screenplays that I'd written, the one that I began working on with Gil, these were comedies. Gil also came out of comedy. He came out of theater, comedy theater in New York. He trained as an accountant. He understood that if you have $1 to make your show, do not spend $1 because you haven't got it. Now, if you can do your show for 99 cents or 98 cents and make it still look like $1, okay, this is good. Better yet, if you can do your show for 97 cents and make it look like $1 or $2, now you're on to something. The creative process is constant problem solving. And Gil's solution to solving the creative problems wasn't throw more money at it, it was throw more creativity at it. This is exactly the way that I approached the problem that is creativity. And so we bonded, and Gil, being a strong producer, had been hired by HBO to produce a series called The Hitchhiker, which Gil had done up in Vancouver, and HBO was very happy. They had a problem production, a very expensive production with some very expensive movie makers, a thing called Vietnam War Stories that was shooting in Savannah, Georgia. It was way over budget. The schedule was a mess. And they sent Gil in to take it over and right the ship, and that's what he did. Not only did he bring it in on time and on budget, it won a bunch of awards. And about a year later, they had another expensive project that was in trouble. And they needed Gil to step in. And as a producer, as a responsible producer responsible with the money and the time, and the project was called Tales from the Crypt. Since I was Gil's creative partner and writing partner, I was part of the package. Now, at the time that HBO first started working on Tales from the Crypt in the late 80s, HBO, basically just movies, they had just begun to dip their toe into original creative programming. They had a couple of series, First and 10, Dream On, but these were basically just single camera shows with the word fuck and tits. You took out fuck and tits. It's basically just network ready single camera shows in every single way. They were TV shows. 4 mega movie producers, Joel Silver, Joel, the Lethal Weapon franchise, Alien and Predator franchises, the Matrix franchise. That's all Joel. Richard Donner, director of The Omen, Superman, Walter Hill, 48 Hours, and multiple incredible other movies, and Bob Zemeckis, Back to the Future, and Forrest Gump. These 4 mega producers had a passion project, a comic book series they loved from their boyhoods, the EC Comics horror. They loved Tales from the Crypt. And they wanted to take this passion project and do it with a feature film vision inside HBO's little TV box, and HBO jumped up and down and said, "Yeah, do whatever you want, guys, do whatever you want." And so these Hollywood movie producers went to work making a TV series, a thing which they had no idea how to do, and didn't do it like a TV series. Among the things they didn't do was they didn't develop the show before they started writing scripts. They just went right to work writing the first 3 episodes, and the first season was just 6 episodes. But to translate a franchise from one medium, from comic books, to a TV series, well, it doesn't translate itself. Someone's got to be responsible for taking all the elements that you want from there that you're going to put into here. Well, no such person was hired. A story editor, a producer, whose responsibility was, managing the franchise, such as it is, or being aware of the fact that this is you're dealing with a franchise here. You have to handle it differently. No one had that job. By the same token, no one had the way that you pay for a TV series. When whatever the network is that's going to run the TV series, they pay a license fee every time they run the show. But that first time or 2, even 3 that they're going to run the episode, whatever they're going to pay for the license fee is not going to pay for the cost of production. You need a deficit partner to pay for the real cost of production until such a time as this whole thing goes into profits. Hopefully it gets the syndication. All right. But the executive producers never got a deficit partner. And HBO ordered, like I said, the first season was 6 episodes. No one got, that wasn't a problem. But then they ordered a season 2 of 18 episodes. Excuse me. A season 2 of 18 episodes and a season 3 of 13 episodes. And the executive producers just started spending the money that HBO was going to put up as the license fee. It was going to cost more than the license fee, that HBO was going to put up. And the night after the second season, the night before the wrap party, HBO handed the executive producers a financial statement and said, "Guys, you are $1 million cash in the hole that we cash flowed. If you want to see season 3," and there, of course, was lots of money for the executive producers in season 3. "If you want to see season 3, pay us, give us the money you owe us right now." The executive producers promptly canceled the wrap party. They fired everybody. They got out their checkbooks, literally, and paid HBO the $1 million that they owed them. And so there was a season 3. The first thing, of course, that they were going to do, the executive producers, which they did, was they took that $1 million out of the budget, right back into their pockets. HBO wanted a producer they could trust, and that's where Gil came in. And since I was Gil's partner, and no one had been doing the story editor job, the executive producers didn't care. And so, though I did not have the bona fides to run that show, I became its co-showrunner with Gil. The 3rd season was supposed to be the end of Tales from the Crypt, but something happened. That had to do with my other job on the show. My first job was to translate all the stuff from the comic books into our series, to make sure that every last frame was redolent of the franchise. And so every script had to go through me. I was the last typist, as it were, before scripts went to department heads to do their work, before casting. Yeah, everything had to flow through me. So I was the last word on the words. My other job was to write Crypt Keeper segments. Just as the executive producers had not put the show into development or found a deficit partner, they hadn't put the Crypt Keeper through any kind of development process either. The Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair. The executive producers wanted their own Crypt Keeper, and one day, entirely by happenstance, executive producer Joel Silver was at his storage facility, and the locker right across the way, owned by a special effects guy named Kevin Yeager. And when Joel walked into Kevin Yeager's locker and saw the stuff that Kevin, who was a special effects maestro, had been creating, among Kevin's other creations is Chucky, Joel said, "You got to make me a Crypt Keeper. You got to make me a Crypt Keeper." And that's what Kevin did. So Kevin Yeager created the Crypt Keeper puppet, which is actually 6 puppeteers working in synchronization. One's the right arm, one's the left arm, one has the control of the head and torso's movement laterally, backwards and forwards. And then there were 3 puppeteers working the animatronic cervixes on the Crypt Keeper's face and eyes, lips, and mouth. Kevin found John Kassir, who became the voice. And so they had a great puppet, they had a great voice, but no one ever asked the question, but who's the Crypt Keeper? Whoever in those first 2 seasons, whoever wrote the script threw a couple words at the Crypt Keeper, and that's what he said, more or less. I don't know how you write for a character who isn't. And so simply to do my job, I put a character inside him. Now, I grew up loving old movies. Love the Marx Brothers. So the Crypt Keeper became my little Groucho. And having to invest a personality inside the character and being a writer and therefore somewhat a little bit lazy, I reached for the closest personality at hand, which was mine. And so I filled the Crypt Keeper with me. So the Crypt Keeper looks like Kevin's puppet. He sounds like John's voice, but every thought in his head, every word that tumbled from his animatronic mouth was me. Now, I can tell you that writing Crypt Keeper segments was maybe the hardest thing I ever had to do creatively. It was like pulling organs through your nose. We would do them in batches because we produced them in batches. It was, like I said, 6 puppeteers, and we suddenly had the Crypt Keeper doing and being things. We were exploring his inner life, giving him an inner life. And so all these things had to be choreographed with the puppeteers, and it took time to set up the crypt set, and especially if you were going to be adding physical production gags to it, we would do 3 or 4 at a time, which meant I would have to write 3 or 4 at a time. And like I said, it was pulling organs through your nose. Once I decided, all right, what's he going to be this week? What's the interest? What world is he going to explore? And then I'd have to make lists of words relevant to that field. Art. Okay, so different kinds of artist names. And then I'd look to cryptify them. How many of those words could I put into the Crypt Keeper's mouth with his spin on them? And if there were enough words that were clever enough that you could join together in some semi-coherent sentences that had to do with what he was talking about, well, then I knew I could write a script. But I needed to do it, in other words, all the background to know there were more dead ends than there were successful. Yeah, there were a lot of great. Yeah, it just seemed, wow, that'll be great fun. And I'd get only 4 or 5, which wasn't enough to write a whole intro and an outro. And I'd have to abandon them. It was incredible. A challenge. It was agony. But once it was done, then I'd go and I'd record them with John, and we tweaked them. We'd usually add a little bit of something. John always had some terrific improvs that, I was always happy to claim credit for. And we'd record them on what was called the beep track. Production day would come, and our whole crew would be there, and puppeteers would be ready. The director would yell action, and puppeteers would be ready. The beep track would start to roll. We hear beep, 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 and then John's voice. And suddenly the Crypt Keeper would come to life. And he as I stood there watching him, I knew he was a puppet until he started talking, and then he's alive, and then he'd finish, and the director would yell, cut, and he'd sag back to the desk like the inert thing he actually was. And the Crypt Keeper came to life. And that I think is what happened more than anything during the third season. Our franchise got born. And yeah, a franchise emerged out of the series. And among the benefits, we got to run for another 5 seasons. We had total, 7 seasons in total, 5 that I was part of. And Universal Pictures saw the incredible value in our franchise, and they ordered 3 feature films. And with that feeling. Now, the first one was a terrific movie called Demon Knight, which Ernest Dickerson directed. In fact, its 30th anniversary is coming up. There are a couple of is that for Demon Knight? Yeah, there's a screening of Demon Knight that I'm going to in about a week for the 30th anniversary of Demon Knight. Incredibly exciting. Gil was supposed to direct Demon Knight, but it's a monster movie. And he didn't want to do a monster movie. As we were looking around Tales from the Crypt movies, among the movies that we almost did was Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn, which was in the mix, but we couldn't make a deal with Quentin, and so we ended up doing Demon Knight instead. But Demon Knight was such a monster movie. Gil didn't want to do a monster movie. Our problem, like I said, we didn't come out of horror, neither Gil nor I. And we were afraid that the town would begin to see us as one-trick ponies, as this town does, just horror. And so we wanted the feature film that we were going to make to be to represent us as having more than just that. We had developed a script called Dead Easy, and the whole creative team got aboard, and Universal got aboard, and that was supposed to be the second Crypt feature. Dead Easy was very much a departure from the first movie, which was, like I said, a monster movie. Dead Easy was a taut psychological thriller about a recovered memory that took place in the swamps outside New Orleans. A wonderful villain, this Harlequin character. Like I said, Universal was aboard. We were spending their money. We had cast a young unknown named Salma Hayek to play the female lead. We spent 6 months in New Orleans prepping the movie. Literally, the whole team was in New Orleans getting ready when 3 weeks before the start of principal photography, Universal called us on the phone and said, "Stop, don't spend another penny. Get on an airplane, come home. You're not making that movie." And bewildered, we flew back to LA, and there Universal stuck another script under our noses called Bordello of Blood. They said, "Look, your release date hasn't changed. You still start shooting in 3 weeks. Get to work on fixing this thing, guys. Get to work." So where did Bordello of Blood come from? Well, at about this time, a brand new studio called DreamWorks had come into being. DreamWorks was Steven Spielberg leaving his deal at Universal, but not the lot. He stayed on the lot, and becoming a separate studio unto himself. And being a separate studio, he began to make talent deals. And Universal was desperately afraid of losing another big piece of talent. One of my executive producers, Bob Zemeckis. Steven was Bob's mentor. Universal went to Bob. They said, "Bob, we love you, Universal. What can we do to make you stay?" Obviously, they made a deal because Bob stayed. I know one deal point. It's all I know. Universal Pictures agreed to pay Bob Zemeckis $500,000 for the first student script he and Bob Gale, the future Back to the Future writers, ever wrote when they were students at USC, a thing called Bordello of Blood. It was just a way to put $500,000 in Bob's pocket as part of a larger deal. The production was not intended, but Universal sat there thinking to themselves, "We're just going to eat $500,000? Wait a minute, Bob's about to He's about to executive produce this other horror movie, this Dead Easy thing. We got $50,000 on that script. Screw that. We'll take it out of their budget. Guys, you're making Bordello of Blood instead. Hey, it's got Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale's name on it. The Back to the Future guys. That's bigger than Alan Katz and Gil Adler, right? And so, for that rather cynical reason, the creative team, and Gil and I, but the entire Crypt creative team, and I will point out that making Crypt was, and anyone who made Crypt would tell you to this day, it was one of the career highlights because of all the incredible creative freedom that we had. Of the 70 some odd episodes that I oversaw, I got 3 total notes from HBO. 3. That tremendous creative freedom, it was a show that all the creators who worked on it loved doing because of its integrity. Well, now, integrity, what's that? Once Universal made that decision and sent us down a road making a movie that none of us wanted to make, well, one should not be shocked if every day becomes stupider than the day before it, because really, you make a movie you don't want to make. It became my personal Waterloo. And indeed, every day was stupider than the day before. Gosh. We ended up making it in Vancouver instead of Los Angeles, not because there was anything in Vancouver that we wanted or needed to make our horror movie, but because Joel, our executive producer, was in a constant war with the IA, the union that represented our crew. And sometimes Joel was up and sometimes the IA was up. They had just struck us. They had shut down a TV movie set, a TV movie we were doing Fox, called Weird World in the end. And so Joel's attitude was, fuck me, no, fuck you. And so rather than shoot, our crew would have been in New Orleans with us. If we had shot Bordello in LA, our crew would have been with us. Instead, we took it to Vancouver where our crew could not go with us. And so we took it out of the country for no other reason than for an incredibly cynical reason. Now, here's a weird thing. We were shooting our movie in July, our horror movie. When you go that far north in July, one of the essentials in shooting a horror movie is dark, nighttime. Nighttime is when horror movies take place. When you're that far north at that time of the year, one of the things you don't have a whole lot of is night. It doesn't get shootable dark until midnight. And then the first bit of light appears, northern sky, 4-ish. So really, you have 4 shootable hours. Film shooting day is 13 hours. No. This was a completely... How stupid can you be? The climax of the movie was shot in a glass church where, we painted ourselves into a corner and then shot ourselves in the foot. Really and truly, the mistakes compounded in their stupidity. Then my executive producer, Joel, took over casting the 3 leads. Now, casting this movie was always going to be hard because like the first thing we did, the three weeks of prep that we had was to try to get the script. Our crew, we went from making a project that we all believed in, that we all saw as a way to tell the town, hey, look how multifaceted we are. Instead of that project, we were making a student movie that none of us were invested in or could possibly invest in. From get rewriting, guys, make this script work. Well, the hero is a small town detective. Now, ask yourself, how much business can a detective actually do in a small town? Not enough to be a small town detective. That's a non sequitur. It's the kind of thing film students might think of because they've never lived in the real world, and certainly not long enough to realize that character doesn't exist. And so when you go to understand the character, so as to write the character, so as to justify the character, so when the actor is going to come to you at some point and say, so where do I come from again? Nowhere. You don't come from anywhere. No such person exists. And so right off the bat, there was no way to write characters that were going to resonate. Hey, they're supposed to be funny too. I don't know how you write generic funny without it being generic. And it was a very problematic creative corner to have been placed into. We, in our casting, Gil and I, we wanted, and we had read for, and we were going to cast Danny Baldwin, one of the Baldwin brothers. I think he, just through sheer force of personality, would have given the character a little bit of something. But Joel insisted on casting Dennis Miller. To this day, I could not tell you why. Our horror audience was there for the special effects and the special effects makeup. They did not give a toss about a political comedian who spoke about arcane things in an arcane way. I didn't care about him. Dennis didn't want to do the movie and said, all right, I'll do it for $1 million, figuring no one in their right fucking mind would pay Dennis $1 million to be in a movie. Up to that point, I can tell you, because we looked it up at the time, the handful of movies he'd done, he got paid scale. Why would you pay that guy $1 million above his quote? You know,
I feel like this story, Alan, is so Hollywood, right? Like it perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with the city, with the industry. My heart aches for you. I find a little bit of irony in it that Selma ended up going and doing From Dusk Till Dawn.
She bet on the right horse, didn't she?
It sure seemed like it, right?
I know why he hired Erica Leniak. Joel, we wanted Bridget Wilson. Joel hired Erica. But Erica, as soon as she agreed to be in our movie, Bordello of Blood, decided she didn't want to be that kind of actress doing this kind of movie.
Well, I'm assuming that the actors and actresses that are coming in, and they can see the dysfunction that's going on around this as well. I mean, Hollywood's a small town. I assume that everyone knows the backdoor deals and the things that are happening, and
nobody knows anything. Nobody in our little neck
because they're all up so far up their own butts, right?
Erica didn't want to do the movie. Hey, why did we hire Angie Everhart to be the villain in the movie? We hired Angie because at the time that we were about to start making Bordello in Vancouver, executive producer Joel and executive producer Dick Donner were making another movie in Seattle called Assassins. And that starred Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone. And Stallone was engaged to Angie Everhart at the time. And one day on the set of Assassins, Stallone approached Joel. He said, hey, Joel, we're making a movie in Vancouver. Why don't you put my girlfriend Angie in your movie that we can visit each other across the border? And Joel, rather than being a responsible executive producer and saying, that's a great idea, Sly, but let me talk to the guys, make sure it works for them. He said, that's a great idea, Sly. Period.
Done.
And he committed our movie to hiring the girlfriend of an actress on another movie just to make that actor happy. Not a thought as to what that would do to our movie. Now, Angie's a
no
lovely human
respect
being.
for art. No respect for the art of the filmmaking whatsoever. And I'm sure that you guys just get more and more disillusioned as time goes on.
But think of it, but even if one takes it from a closer to the bone approach, from Joel's perspective, why are you shitting on your franchise? Why are you disrespecting this money-making venture of your own? Why are you undermining its success? Why are you setting it up for failure? Assassins is a one-shot deal. You'll make that movie, there won't be any more. Tales from the Crypt is your cash cow, you idiot. And literally, he didn't think that way. His one concern was making an actor happy on a set. Now, the thing about Stallone is that Stallone had an ulterior motive. He intended to break up with Angie, which is what he did 2/3 of the way through the movie, and we were going to be the consolation prize, which we were in the conversation that he had with her when he broke up. Hey, I got your movie, didn't I? Now, here's the thing. Angie's a lovely person. This is Angie. I have nothing but nice things to say about Angie. This is a bad casting decision. Here's the thing about casting, and this connects into podcasting at the end of the day. I cast lots and lots of actors, but I never hired a single one of them to act. Not for the camera. No. For the theater, yeah, you got to act because the people in the back row got to see and hear. Yes, you got to act. But the camera is right in your face. It's right there. And so it's like it's standing next to you. If you act, that's what the camera will see. You're acting. For the camera, I hired people to be successful screen acting is the actor being as emotionally naked as they possibly can be at key moments, and like a light switch. They can't act the emotion. They have to be it as real as real can be. And that's what successful acting is. In the first movie, Demon Knight, Billy Zane is an amazing villain. He's an amazing villain in Titanic and all those movies where Billy plays a dark character, because Billy ain't acting the darkness. There's a real darkness inside of Billy, and Billy's skill is he can tap into this darkness inside him and put it out there for us all to see inside the framework of these characters. Angie is a wonderful human being. There's not a villainous anything inside of her. For Angie, an untrained actress, even if she had been trained, because there's nothing like that inside of her, all she could do was act it. But she
had no well to pull from.
Right. There's literally, she would have to make come up out of her imagination, but that's not how it works. It was literally an impossible assignment. And so all she can do is act, and that's all, for my money, all the camera can see. She's working as hard as she possibly can. The fault's not hers, not even remotely. It's ours on a ridiculous hire. We did not hire Angie because Joel said, I've got this instinct, a gut instinct about her. Trust me. That's not what no. A very cynical reason. Ultimately, yes, Stallone, like I said, our production office, the first couple of weeks, yeah, so I could visit, so we could visit each other across the border. Yeah, my production office in Vancouver arranged with their production office in Seattle for that to happen. And so there was a lot of communication between our production offices. They became quite close. And so a lot of information traveled back and forth, and we became aware of the fact that a couple of weeks, about 2 weekends in, we got a message from their production office. They said, hey, can you hold Angie for the weekend? Hold her for the weekend? What? So she can't go to Seattle? Why? To do her homework? No. That's not how this works here. We became aware of the fact that he had many other things going on behind Angie's back. There's a very famous story about Stallone that he has never denied. The only question has ever been, on what film set did this story take place? And I would tell you it took place on the set of Assassins, because I had never heard the story before. The first time I ever heard it was from my production office on Bordello of Blood, who heard it from the production office of Assassins. Stallone finishes a scene. He goes back to his trailer, unaware of the fact that his wireless lavalier mic is still broadcasting to the sound card. There's a young woman waiting for him in his trailer, and she proceeds to fillet Sly. Now, apparently, Sly's very particular about how he likes his blowjobs. Now, meanwhile, people are gathering around the sound cart listening to this. And now they're hearing Sly go, yeah, that's right. Stroke the shaft, cup the balls. Yeah, cup the balls, stroke the shaft. The next day, he shows up on set, and the whole crew are wearing T-shirts that say, stroke the shaft, cup the balls. As I've said, he has never denied the story. I think he's rather proud of the story, in fact. It's only been a question of which film set, and I would tell you it was that film set only because that's where I heard it from myself. It was a terrible film shoot. Our Canadian crew hated us almost from the jump, and rightfully so. Gosh, when we got to the rap, when we got to the rap party, our Canadian crew hated us so much, hated the Americans so much that if we had thrown a rap party and invited everyone, not a single Canadian would have shown up. Our Canadian line producer, Colleen Neistat, threw a rap party. She invited all the Americans. I was the only one who showed, and it was not comfortable that I showed, but I thought, somebody should. We did not have a complete movie. When we left Vancouver, we had to do some reshooting down in Los Angeles. We did not make our Halloween date, though we could have. Instead, Universal just had lost interest in this, and they released this the following August. By the time the movie was released, we had shot the final season of Crypt in London. When we got back to Los Angeles, we began prepping what was going to be Crypt's replacement, a sci-fi series based on the comic books. And the executive, Joel, decided he didn't want me on that show. And so I got fired even before I got hired. And though I expected Gil to walk with me, we're a team, man, he didn't. And so Gil and I broke up. And
that was the end of an era.
We didn't talk to each other for 25 years. Now, as I said, Bordello of Blood, it broke something. It was my Waterloo, and it broke something. Doing something for all the wrong reasons broke something inside me. Well, it fed a darkness that had been there for a long, long time that I wasn't even aware. That I knew about, that I was denying. This began, I did 2 great seasons on The Outer Limits that I enjoyed very much, getting back into Vancouver, 2 wonderfully creative, about 3 creative years. But aside from that, I began a 2-decade-long descent into a deepening depression and a writer's block I did not even know I was in. And it all tied to a secret that I had been keeping from myself since I was 14. 3 days before Christmas 2016, I came within literal inches of killing myself. And I knew instantly that though I didn't succeed that time, I knew I was quite capable of making a fatally stupid mistake. I was up to it now. I drove immediately to my GP and I said, here's what I've done and here's what I want to do. I knew I needed a mood stabilizer. I knew I was in a horribly dark place, but my dad was a surgeon. I grew up in the medical culture. I understood that world in a lot of ways, and I knew that my GP, mood stabilizers is really complex. Even under the best of circumstances, it's an experiment, because you just don't need, for 6 to 8 weeks, it might work, might make it worse. Don't know. I knew my GP had no background in this. The last pharmaceutical rep walked through their office. Hey, got any depressed patients? Try them out on this. This is what we make. And that's what he was going to hand me. And I didn't want to be a lab experiment with none of the boxes ticked off. I had done some research on that world, and I had identified one that I thought might work better for me than the others. And so I said to my GP, here's what I want to do. And he whipped out his smartphone. He looked it up. He said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And he wrote the script. I took it to my local pharmacy and went home, told my family what I was going to do. And that night I took my first minimal dose of that medication. And then 36 hours later, I got super lucky. I leveled. At the minimal dose, the medicine began to work. And what it did was I could feel it putting the darkness inside, not a box, but a cage. No, I can still see my darkness. I know it's there, but now it can reach for me, but it can't get me. And as I suddenly realized that my darkness no longer held me in its grasp, I could stop blaming myself for all the things I've been blaming myself, and suddenly open to the secret that I've been keeping, that when I was 14, I was sexually molested twice by the religious director at the synagogue where my family belonged outside of Baltimore. Now, the first time is bad. For me, it was the second time that set the hook. It's the second time where inside my head, the second time happened because I didn't say anything the first time. So in the middle of the second time is when I said to myself, this is your fault. You made this happen. And it's entirely untrue. It is not a 14-year-old kid's fault that an adult is treating them like a sex toy. But that's not how our minds work. And I took this unto myself. And every terrible thing that happened to me thereafter, it was your fault. Regardless of whether it was true or not. Yeah, sometimes it was my fault. But to simply take that unto yourself it's not the truth. It doesn't solve anyone's problem, and it doesn't solve your problem. In fact, it tends to exacerbate everything because it's not honest. Well, coming clean to myself about the fact that this happened, the hardest thing I've ever gone through, late Friday night, the middle of the night, I took myself out of bed. I curled up on the bathroom floor and I wept for the 14-year-old me who needed a hug and to be alleviated of the responsibility. It is so true what they say about the truth setting you free. I've always been grateful to Hebrew school for making me the atheist I am today, but I understand what it means to be born again. And in a very real life sense, I was born again. The truth set me free. A burden was lifted from my shoulders, and whereas my family walked around me like I was a minefield, over the course of time, I've become a trusted voice for virtually everything. I'm steady. I'm a rock, and I was not. The other thing that happened, if you can't tell your own story to yourself, can you really tell anyone else's story? No, you can't. Once I could suddenly tell my own story to me with balls to the wall honesty, I could tell anybody's story. And that became my thing. During the pandemic, a Tales from the Crypt fan group, 3 dads from various parts of the country, all Tales from the Crypt fans, they created a podcast called Dads from the Crypt, which is still available, Dads from the Crypt. You should check it out. They reviewed all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and give parenting advice. One of the dads, Jason Stein, reached out to me and he said, hey, we're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. You want to sit in one of us? And I said, yeah, great, love to. And it was great fun. Great fun. A few weeks later, Jason reached out again. He said, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to sit in with us again? And I said, Jason, the story of the making of Bordello of Blood is not a half-hour chat with you. It's a podcast unto itself. And that was where my first podcast, the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, that's its birth story. Now, I wanted to tell the story with balls to the wall honesty. There are 3 people I wanted to call it. I wanted to call out Dennis Miller. Dude, we're paying you $1 million. You don't have to be an asshole every fucking day. Really, you don't. Stallone, because you made us co-conspirators in your betrayal of a very nice person. I resent that to this day. And I needed to call him out for that because we all knew behind Angie's back what was happening. And until he broke up with her, and then she was deservedly so. She was a mess, an emotional mess. Yeah, I needed to call him out for that. The other person that I needed to call out was me. And I needed to own, well, I was an inconfident person and therefore a terrible producer. And I was doing a project I didn't care about. Well, you had the title of producer, you were taking the money to be the producer, do the job. And I need to own up. So the person I most wanted to call out, and the stories were hilarious. but I needed to call me out as part of, hey, confession. That's part of the healing process for me, was to speak the absolute truth. Now, in order to do this, I was going to have to talk to Gil. And so I reached out to Gil. I said, here's what I want to do. I want to tell the story with balls to the wall honesty. And I want to also tell with balls to the wall honesty the story of our breakup and what happened over the last 25 years. And I don't want to talk about it beforehand. We're going to do a live on mic. Whatever we say, we say. Whatever happens, happens. Balls to the wall honesty. And he said, oh, I don't know one. And okay, went along. And I'm so glad he did. That first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, Entertainment Weekly called the best film podcast of 2022. And the reason that Clark Collis, who wrote those very kind words, said those very kind words, is because of the incredible honesty of the storytelling. We went on to do ultimately 4 seasons of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. Ultimately became about just talking to all the craftspeople I know about the creative craft, the joys, and occasionally what happens when the craft turns to crap. It happens. I did an episode that I'm really proud of. I got to work with Malcolm McDowell doing Tales from the Crypt, and Malcolm tells wonderful stories about the making of How Not to Make a Porno Movie, Caligula. And just the most amazing stories about the making of that movie. So, there's an episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. The special we did on How Not to Make a Porno, the making of Caligula, is a terrific piece of content. I highly recommend it. But a friend from school reached out to me, and he wanted to do a TV series about something that had happened to him. Absolutely true story. But here's the thing, and it's an amazing story. I turned it into a podcast. We'll get to that momentarily. Here's the thing, though. To take an idea from, let's say, my head and turn it into a TV series, a movie, but a TV series. Script is going to take you years to get right. Years. Count on it. The average is 10. But let's say I'm really clever and I can get it done in 3. All right, now we're 3 years down the road. All right, now the script is ready. It's a marketplace. If it's a TV series, well, all right, you just wrote S1E1. What about S1E2? And season, how many episodes are in the first season? What happens in all those? What's the major story arc of the first season? And what happens in season 2 and season 3 and season 4? I noticed you got all these characters. Who are all these people? You write what's called a Bible, and that don't write itself. That takes another year if you're lucky to get right. And every time, hey, you dig deeper into the world that you're creating, that's going to impact your script. So these two things suddenly become wired together. And let's say you're 5 years in now. We'll be kind. All right, now you're ready for the marketplace. You've done all this work. You have to impress a handful of executives and a handful of executive suites to read all this material you've created. To get them to read, you've got to create a pitch deck, which is a PowerPoint presentation, spare a couple of words, images. What's this about? What's the IP? What's the franchise? What are you selling? Just to get these people to read. Now, let's say I choose you. I understand. I think I understand you. Let's develop you. Well, that just puts you at the top of the food chain, at the top of the meat grinder, the food chain, the top of the meat grinder. Now the grinding begins, and there are now thousands of assholes who can stand in your way, and at any one point, any one of those assholes can kill your project dead just because they're an asshole. And never mind what sausage will come out the other end. You've spent years, and by the way, at the entry point, when the executive said, okay, yes, we'll put this into development, the first thing that you will do is give up ownership. You will sign a certificate of authorship, necessary because of this product and its distribution. You will give up all ownership throughout the known universe in perpetuity. You cease to become the owner. And as the writer, one of the first things they'll be thinking about doing, count on it, is firing you and hiring a real writer. You don't, whatever ownership you take, whatever money you get, it ain't yours anymore. To take the same idea and turn it into a podcast, there's only one asshole standing in my way, and it's me. Podcasting, one can be a one-person band. You can do it all. You can create everything. And distribution, everywhere in the whole world, just like everyone else. So creation, distribution, and hey, the relationship with the money is person to person. It's peer to peer. Me, Stripe, and the audience. Content distribution and payment structure. Podcasting, and hey, at the end of the day, I own all the content 100%. So I can take that same story and produce it and tell it exactly the way I want. All right, audio, it's radio, it's theater of the mind. It's a wonderful creative environment to work in. When my friend approached me with, I'd like to do a TV series, I said, no, you don't. No, you don't. Especially this piece of material is really tricky. It's kind of dark and it's morally ambiguous. I said, no, you want to do it as a podcast. And so he said, okay. And so that was my first story podcast, The Donor, a DNA horror story. It's a 7-episode series, absolutely true story about my friend Hal. Worked his way through medical school in the mid-late 90s as an anonymous sperm donor. Jump forward 27 years, successful radiologist. He joined 23andMe, curious about his health genes. No idea the ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA data bank. That's what 23andMe and Ancestry are. If you use that service, he lost his donor anonymity. Suddenly, 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was Hal, a sperm donor. The 7th was one of the daughters. She brought a thing called genetic sexual attraction to the table. Now, Hal and genetic sexual attraction is a very real thing. The adoption community has known about it for a long time. The woman who coined the term, Barbara Gagne, gave up a son for adoption when she was 16. No communication, no connection with him. She met him 25 years later as an adult. And there's data that says when people who are genetically related but who are not raised together, when they meet each other as adults, there's still
a connection there.
There are things. She fell head over heels in love with her son, and he fell head over heels in love with her. She was quite ready to become sexually active with him. He wasn't quite there, but she described it as the most intense thing she's ever felt in her entire life. Hal had never raised a genetic child of his own. He'd been married to a woman for 20 years who brought a son from a previous marriage. Hal raised him, adopted him as an adult, but suddenly having these 7 people that he was genetically related to, he was interested in. He wasn't going to be their father. They all had fathers, but he was quite open to being fatherly toward them, and he had money. He was quite open to cutting them in on the inheritance because they were blood. But genetic sexual attraction, it was like a hand grenade thrown into the tent. The relationship between the donor-conceived siblings, they sometimes call themselves diblings, is very intense. These are people discovering, I've got a half-brother, I've got a half-sister. Holy cow. An amazingly tight bond. Much tighter than that between that with the donor. And a much easier relationship than with the donor. That's a much more complex relationship. So when GSA is brought into the table, the Diblings bond and they turn on Hal. And It's called The Donor and DNA Horror Story. There are monsters aplenty, and hey, I've written a few horror stories. That was my first story podcast I discovered as I was producing it and writing it and telling Hal's story, that I had become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which is a podcaster. I loved, again, the point was to tell this story with balls to the wall honesty. In order to tell Hal's story, I had to do a lot of background research on the donor-conceived community. And among the people who very kindly agreed to talk to me and let me interview her was a woman named Donna Hall. Donna learned at 40 that she was donor-conceived. But when she told me her own story, I said, Donna, you're a podcast unto yourself. She said, yeah, I know. I've been trying to do it, but it's hard. Well, yeah. Even a great story has to be told the right way to be a great story. And Donna has a great fucking story. That became my next story podcast, The Hall Closet, which is Donna Hall telling the story of what it was like growing up in the 1990s, in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia. The Halls weren't the Corleones from the Godfather movies, but they made national headlines just the same. Donna's mom, Phyllis, maybe the worst mom ever, spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepfather, John Hall, was a true criminal mastermind. He was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars on bullshit confessions that he concocted to mitigate his own considerable legal jeopardy. Among the people that he put away were his own stepson, Herb Hack, who spent 18 months awaiting prison for a murder he did not commit. John Hall also put a man named Walter Ogrod on death row for 24 years for a murder Walter did not commit. When Pennsylvania finally let Walter go, they gave him $9.1 million to try to make up for their mistake, for buying into this corruption. Donna tells the story of what it was like growing up in this environment where every single day, at least one of the adults was committing crime of one kind or another. Donna is a wonderful storyteller. Her podcast is called The Hall Closet Podcast. She is a gregarious, vivacious storyteller, not an ounce of self-pity. And hers is a story about her journey to safety and empowerment. And that's the thing that struck me in telling her story and really feeling like, oh, this is all I want to do. This is the sum total. I want a podcast. The healing power of storytelling. And I know this from my own example, watching Donna go through the healing process of storytelling as she was telling her podcast and very quickly finding her podcaster voice. And as we all do, we find our podcasting voice. And in the way that the camera is a kind of bullshit detector. You try to act in front of it, it'll see it. The microphone is a bullshit detector. It will hear every last bit of artifice you attempt to pass by it. It just will. Honesty is the best policy in front of a microphone. And as we podcasters understand, this is not a piece of equipment. It's an extension of our vocal cords. And just as one would never shout into the ear of a loved one, you speak to it. And the nature of podcasting is, because it's our voices, it's very personal. It's the most personal kind of storytelling. People take our voices and our stories, and they listen with headphones, earbuds. In a car is just a giant sound pod. And they take our voices and our stories, and they place them between their ears into the most intimate of spaces inside their heads. And in that most trusted of spaces, this is where we dwell. And that comes with, it's an awesome honor, but it comes with awesome responsibilities. be honest, to never betray the trust, to be honest, that our listeners have placed in us.
Alan, I don't know if there's a better spot to cut you off. I know that you could probably talk and wax poetic on just everything. What a life you have lived through all of it. And I love what you say about podcasting, because I say it on my shows all the time. It's how I'm healing myself and sharing my own shit, right? And I just am thrilled to have had an opportunity to hear a little bit of your story and to capture a little bit of this for our audience and for myself. This is something I'll remember for a very long time. Can you go ahead and share with us where people can find you, your podcast, your production company? Where can we get more Alan Katz?
And I'm going to just toss in one quick thing because I'm talking to podcasters. Like I said, we own everything. And part of my intention with the stories that I tell is they would make great movies, TV series. And I fully expect, look, in the old days, I would have had to walk cap in hand as the seller. Oh, please, Mr. Executive, understand my IP. Grasp it, please, so you'll maybe put it in development. Well, here, the IP, the intellectual property, the franchise is there in the podcast. We put it on the table in the podcast where everyone can see it and hear it. And in the old days, yes, I would have gone cap in hand to sell that IP. Oh, please understand it. Well, now I don't have to do that anymore. It's there on the table. Everyone, audience and advertisers, they understand what the IP is, and so does that executive, that risk-averse executive. And rather than developing something that's a question mark, they will come towards something that they know what it is. And in the old days, like I said, they're going cap in hand. Now they're going to come to me to buy it. They're going to say, hey, this make a great movie. This is going to make a great TV series. I'm going to go, you're right, it would. And they're going to go, hey, here's the check. And I'm going to look at the check and I'm going to say, hey, that's lovely, but you need to add some zeros and move the decimal point over because you have competition. Stupid. Podcasting, because we can do it all and own it all, is a legitimate way for the creatives to flip the power structure and have the control where it belongs, in the hands of the creatives and not in the hands of the money. Storytelling isn't just empowering. It can and should be enriching, because this is where all the ownership is. We own our stories. You can find me and my message of podcasting power empowerment at, first of all, our website is https costardandtouchstone.com. My company is called Costard and Touchstone. I think I told this to you off air. The reason my company is called Costard and Touchstone, in my very brief acting career, I was in 2 Shakespearean plays. I played the part of Costard in Love's Labour's Lost, and I played the part of Touchstone in As You Like It. Both Costard and Touchstone are wise fools who speak truth to power. That's what Costard and Touchstone, my company, does. We make podcasts that tell the truth, but also speak truth to power. You can find us at costardandtouchstone.com. And wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find The Donor, A DNA Horror Story, The Hall Closet, and some of the great new ones that we just started dropping. Just the Photographer is the absolutely true story. It's Just the Photographer with David Swanson. David is a Pulitzer Prize winning photojournalist. He's shot in war zones from Serbia to Afghanistan to Iraq. He's 9/11. He's been to natural disasters, Katrina, earthquakes in Haiti. His pictures tell 1,000 words. They can tell you what it looked like standing where he stood taking in those dangerous places, but they can't tell you what it felt like. And that's what the podcast is. It's David telling the stories his incredible, iconic pictures cannot tell. It's also the impact of sometimes what the process of telling the story has on the storyteller. That also is a very important part of the podcast. That's Just the Photographer, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Again, our mission at Costard and Touchstone is to make the world a better place through storytelling. Podcasting is our storytelling medium of choice. That is our mission. and thank you for helping us on our mission and spread our collective mission of hey, making podcasting as powerful as it is.
Alan Katz, thank you so much for sharing this wealth of insight into the underbelly, if you will, the emptying the crypts of Hollywood and telling some great stories, man. That was an absolute joy. Alan, thanks for being part of the scene.
My pleasure.